Be honest, do you actually know how the EU works? Most people don't. We don't see it as a country, but look closer. It walks and talks like one. It has its own, not one, but two presidents. President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, and President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. A council of leaders, Commission, Parliament, Council of Ministers, courts, a central bank that controls the finances of 27 nations, and a common budget moving billions across 27 states. Here's the promise. We'll draw a clear line between what's EU and what's strictly national. Government control, laws, taxes, budgets, on both European Union and national levels. We'll map the EU's state, follow a single law from draft to adoption, trace how contributions flow into the budget and how each euro is distributed across the Union, and clarify where EU defence truly sits. You'll leave with a practical grasp of EU politics, how decisions are made, how they shape your daily life, and where the real leverage points are. You'll also see a clear path that will help you invest better in EU. When Brussels commits budget to sectors and regions, economies and companies tend to accelerate. Just look at the last decade in Poland and Romania. They almost doubled and tripled. We will show real cases of public companies in the EU that rose in value a lot as a result of Brussels commitments. If you're an investor, retail trader, or entrepreneur, you don't want to miss opportunities like that.
Quick thing before we start. About 98% of people who watch aren't subscribed. We know, it's easy to miss. Please take 2 seconds to double check that subscribe button. It's a free thing for anybody that watches our videos. Can do to help us here. You're part of building this channel with us and motivate us to bring higher quality production, deeper research, so we can make the complex simple for you. Quick check. Subscribed? Awesome. Drop a like to boost it. We appreciate you being on this journey with us. Thank you.
Europe in 1945 wasn't just wounded, it was bankrupt and suspicious. The fix wasn't poetry, it was plumbing. Make the next war too expensive to fight by binding the materials of war, coal and steel, under one rule book. If tanks need steel, make steel a shared decision. 1950, the Schuman Plan was developed. 1951, 6 states signed the Coal and Steel Community. Inspectors can walk into plants, prices get coordinated, and producers compete under the same rules. Markets as peacekeepers. That was the experiment. That experiment scaled. 1957, the Treaty of Rome creates the European Economic Community, drop internal tariffs, negotiate as one outside, and write common product rules. The logic: reduce friction, increase scale, attract investment. The core product becomes the single market. 4 freedoms: goods, services, people, capital, moving across borders. Standards replace barriers. Mutual recognition lets approvals travel. One rule book can unlock 20+ markets. That's not bureaucracy, that's leverage. Politically, the Single European Act in 1986 created Europe of the 12 and speeds decisions by using more majority voting in specific areas. Fewer blanket vetoes, still bounded by treaties, but finally executable at scale. In the early 90s, the single market switches on and you feel it as convenience. Fewer queues on borders, cheaper flights, more choice on the shelves. The trade-off: coordination is slow and messy, but once consensus lands, change is continental. Interdependence cuts conflict. Common rules cut costs. Scale attracts capital. That compounding, quiet and unglamorous, is Europe's superpower. Next, we'll draw the borderlines, what the EU is and isn't. Officially, the EU isn't a single country. It's a union of sovereign states that pool power where doing it together works better. Treaties set the menu. Members choose what to hand over and what to keep. That's why Europe often feels half federal, half national by design. Think of three overlapping clubs: the EU, the Schengen area, and the Eurozone. Most headlines blend them, but they're different memberships with different rules. You can be in one, two, or all three and still be European. EU equals the political legal union, common laws for the single market, trade policy, competition rules, and more. Schengen equals passport-free travel across internal borders. Eurozone equals countries using the euro and sharing the ECB's monetary policy. Same continent, three different compacts. Membership flexibility explains the map. Denmark in the EU, but not the euro. Norway in Schengen, but not the EU. Ireland in EU and euro, but outside Schengen's land border context. Different paths, same market logic. Reduce friction where it pays, retain control where it matters domestically. What stays national? Most taxation, police and courts, schools, healthcare, defence forces, and key parts of welfare. What's EU level? Customs union, trade deals, competition enforcement, product standards, and parts of environment and consumer protection. The split follows two guardrails: subsidiarity and proportionality. Powers come in three buckets: exclusive EU, like trade policy, customs union; shared, like environment, transport, consumer rules, EU sets frameworks, countries implement; and supporting, like culture, education, EU coordinates and funds, not controls. It's not all or nothing, it's layered. So why confusion? Because the same city, Brussels, hosts decisions for all three clubs, and the same news cycle jumbles them. A border check returning, that's Schengen. Interest rates changing, that's the Eurozone. A charger rule or food label standard, that's the EU single market. The EU acts only where countries agreed it should, by treaty. If a proposal strays, national parliaments can wave a yellow card. That's why Brussels doesn't run your school, but can set air quality limits that cross borders and distort fair competition. Up next, we meet the cast behind these layers: the European Council, Commission, Parliament, and Council of Ministers. Once you know the roles, every EU headline reads like a map. Here's the map of power, by address. In Brussels, European Commission, Council of Ministers, European Council, and much of Parliament, the day-to-day engine. In Frankfurt, the ECB runs Euro money. In Luxembourg, Court of Justice and Court of Auditors, the rule and money watchdogs. In Strasbourg, Parliament's plenary stage. Know the places, decode the roles. Start with the wiring. EU citizens vote in national elections that send leaders to the European Council, and they directly elect the European Parliament. Those two streams power everything in this chart. From here, proposals, approvals, oversight, and money flow through clear lanes. Executive layer is the European Council, 27 national leaders who set the policy agenda. And next door, the European Commission, a president plus 26 commissioners, propose and implement legislation, enforce rules, and run programs. Leaders set direction, the Commission turns it into draft law and day-to-day execution. Legislative layer is the European Parliament. 705 MEPs directly elected. They amend and vote. With across the table, the Council of the EU, 27 national ministers by topic, who co-decide with Parliament. Together they pass laws and adopt the budget. If both say yes, it's law. If either says no, it stalls. Judicial layer is the Court of Justice of the EU. It makes sure EU law means the same everywhere and settles disputes. The European Court of Auditors follows the money, checking that euros are collected and spent properly and that programs deliver value. The financial layer is the European Central Bank in Frankfurt. It runs euro area monetary policy, price stability, interest rates, and bank supervision with national authorities. Not every EU country uses the euro, but ECB decisions ripple across the single market. Foreign policy and defence coordination, responsibilities go to the High Representative, who leads the European External Action Service, the EU's diplomatic service, chairs foreign ministers, coordinates sanctions, and runs civilian military missions under the CSDP. The EU has its own defence toolbox, CSDP missions, PESCO, European Defence Fund, Article 42.7 Mutual Aid Clause. But collective defence for most members primarily runs through NATO and national army. Put it together. Leaders set direction, the Commission proposes and enforces. Parliament and ministers co-legislate and budget. Judges and auditors guard the rules and euros, and the ECB runs the euro. Keep this map in mind. Every EU headline fits somewhere in these boxes. Laws in the EU mostly travel one road, the ordinary legislative procedure. Three actors drive it. The Commission proposes, the European Parliament and the Council of the EU co-decide. When both agree, it becomes law. Let's follow one. The Common Charger, USBC. Step 1. Commission proposal. Years of messy ports and e-waste. The Commission drafts a proposal. One port for most small devices, harmonised fast charging, clear timelines. The Commission sends proposal to Parliament and Council. Step 2. Parliament position. MEPs amend in committee. Plenary backs a broader device list and stronger consumer info. They send it to a council. Step 3. Council position. If national ministers agree on everything, law gets adopted. If not, national ministers agree on a general approach, aligning scope and phase-ins with industry readiness, and send this for discussion to Commission and Parliament. Step 4. Trilogues begin. Parliament, Council and Commission merge texts and agree on final version of the law. One sentence can fix scope, fast charge rules and dates. Step 5. Adoption and entry. Once everyone is satisfied with the law and both sides sign off, the law is published. Phones, tablets and cameras first, laptops later. Less e-waste, fewer charges. Why does it matter? Definitions, thresholds and dates decide who must comply and when, driving pricing and product cycles. Same map, same steps for roaming, energy labels and digital rules. EU budget is a 7-year ceiling PAN, plus yearly plans. The long 7-year frame is the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, MMFF. It caps how much can be committed each year. Inside it, the EU passes an annual budget that schedules yearly payments. Where the money comes from? First, customs duties collected at EU borders. Second, a harmonised VAT-based call from each country. Third, the plastics levy on non-recycled packaging waste. Fourth, own resources, a small formula-based share of each country's gross national income, or GNI. Plus fifth, smaller lines, fines, interest and other receipts. From this table we can see that in 2023, most EU budget revenue came from the GNI-based resource, about 68.4% of the total. Next was traditional own resources, customs duties at roughly 14%. The VAT-based call contributed around 13.4%, and the plastic-based levy added about 4.1%. How customs duties are counted. Each import line pays the common customs tariff rate by product code. Members keep 25% to cover collection costs and transfer 75% to the EU. Amounts are called and paid in monthly twelfths, with adjustments as data firm up. How the VAT-based call works. Each country computes a harmonized VAT base, their VAT revenue adjusted to a common method and capped at 50% of GNI. The EU applies a uniform call rate, generally 0.3%, to that base. Some countries have agreed reduced rates. How the plastics levy is calculated? Since 2021, each country pays €0.8 per kilogram of non-recycled plastic packaging waste. Less wealthy members get lump sum reductions, so the burden is fair. It's designed to nudge recycling up and landfill down. How the GNI-based resource balances the budget. After adding customs, VAT and plastics, the Commission sets a single call rate on each country's harmonised GNI to raise the remaining amount within the ceilings set by the own resources decision. 2024 GNI call rate was a single 0.4812% applied EU-wide. Look at this chart. It shows how much each person in different countries contributed to the EU budget. The EU average per person per month contribution is €25.20 in 2024. This is the biggest and most stable revenue line. Put it all together. Money flows in via these four pillars, and then the EU commits funds to programs, cohesion, CAP, research, infrastructure, external action. Then projects implement, costs are reimbursed, and auditors follow every euro. It's bureaucracy by design, trust through traceability. Previous chapter showed how cash enters the EU. Now let's see who points it, how it's carved into programs, how projects win grants, and how euros actually leave Brussels' account and land on a contractor's invoice. First, direction setting. Leaders agree the 7-year ceilings, MFF. Each year, the Commission proposes a draft budget. Parliament and the Council are the budgetary authority. They negotiate and adopt it. That annual law authorises two numbers: commitments, promises, and payments, cash this year. Then the split by management mode. About 3 lanes: shared, run with Member States, cohesion, CAP; direct, run by the Commission; Horizon, Erasmus, CEF; and indirect, entrusted to bodies like EIB and UN for specific goals. Shared management starts with a partnership agreement per country and operational programmes per theme and region. Those documents lock priorities, targets, and funding rates. It's roadmaps: who funds what, where, and by how much. But why envelopes of some countries are much bigger than the others? For example, look at this chart. Germany paid 25.5 billion more than received, while Poland received almost 12 billion more than paid. The reason are that, first, the cohesion formula tilts funds to places with lower GDP per capita and larger populations. Second, Common Agricultural Policy, CAP, follows hectares and historical entitlements. Third, the Recovery and Resilience Facility, RRF, weights population, GDP, unemployment, and absorption capacity matters. Countries that can prepare projects, meet state aid, procurement rules, and submit clean claims actually draw the money. Poland built strong managing authorities and pipelines over 2 decades, so it tends to absorb funds well. So Poland scores high on all 4: big population, many less developed regions, big farm sector, strong pipelines. How a typical grant is built, cohesion example. A managing authority launches a call, like EDF Defence Capabilities Call. Applicants submit a work plan, budget, indicators. Independent evaluators score. The authority issues a grant agreement with EU co-financing, milestones and audit rights. Payment logic goes in 3 stages. First, pre-financing, a small upfront to start. Second, interim reimbursements against verified costs or unit, lump sum outputs. Third, final balance after results and audits. No results, no money. Commitments versus payments in practice. The EU commits the project total on signature, but pays in tranches as milestones are met. The backlog of yet-to-be-paid commitments is the REL. RAL stands for Reste Liquide, which translates to outstanding commitments or remaining to be paid, managed deliberately across years to smooth cash needs. Controls and corrections of projects and grants also go in 3 layers. First layer, managing audit authorities in the country. Second layer, the Commission. And third layer, EU-level watchdogs, Court of Auditors, OLAF and EPPO. Errors trigger financial corrections, payments pauses or money clawback. Direct management contrasts like Horizon and Erasmus. The Commission or its executive agencies run the whole cycle, publish calls, evaluate centrally, sign with a cross-border consortium, and pay beneficiaries directly, often using simplified costs or lump sums per work package. Indirect management contract. For external action or blended finance, the EU entrusts funds to partners, European Investment Bank or United Nations, under contribution agreements. The partner runs projects under EU set objectives. Reporting, audits and performance indicators feed back to the Commission. Cash in, cash out, monthly rhythm. Member States' contributions arrive in twelfths. Payments go out continuously as certified claims arrive. The EU budget can't run a deficit. Cash flow discipline is built in. Why this budget mechanism matters? It trades speed for trust, transparent calls, measurable outputs, layered audits. Net contributors fund the system. Net recipients convert euros into rail, skills, clean power, growing a market everyone sells into. That's the payoff loop. Now let's see how public companies that received EU funding or grants actually performed. Watch the charts as we go. Each red circle marks the key EU decision or signing. Budimex, Polish company. EU co-financed roadwave deal hits in 2016, with the Ulstein Ring Road approximately €212 million gross. The stock pops approximately 54% in that window. Then, a new 2023 to 25 cohesion pipeline deal triggers a much bigger run. Over 200% from the announcement zone. This is policy turning directly into orders for a listed contractor. CEZ, Czech Republic company. Not a grant. EIB long tenor financing, December 2024, de-risks grid capex. The market treats cheaper, stable funding as equity positive. CEZ climbs approximately 44% in the months after. In utilities, cost of capital is the story. Heidelberg Materials, German company. Innovation Fund grant of €191 million for CCS, signed December 2023. That's non-dilutive fuel, and the stock launches into approximately 160% surge over 2024 to 2025, as investors revalue a de-risked decarbonisation path. Iberdrola, Spanish company. Blended EU support deal, Innovation Fund, RRF plus EIB, pulls forward grids, storage and green molecule projects. From the December 2023 grant signing zone, Iberdrola grinds approximately plus 42% higher as its regulated asset base expands. Transelectrica, Romanian company. Received Modernisation Fund cash, June 2024 disbursement, €64 million included. The market re-rates the multi-year capex. Allowed returns story, TEL, jumps approximately plus 55% from that catalyst. Transgaz, Romanian company. CEF grant for BRUA signed September 2016. Approximately €179 million phase 1. That window alone saw an approximately plus 84% upswing as the corridor de-risked. Years later, expanded flow storage themes keep the asset base relevant, and the equity reprices again. Takeaway for investors: EU programs aren't headlines, they're forward order books. Track Innovation Fund, CEF, Modernization Fund, and EIB approvals. Map them to listed builders and utilities with shovel-ready assets. When public money targets a sector, being early to those names is real, repeatable alpha.
If you're watching this, you already care about patterns. I use the TradingView charting platform to turn those patterns into trades. Dark and light theme, clean charts, fast watch lists, powerful screeners, economic calendar, the best phone charting app with alerts to my pocket, and all indicators I actually need. It covers all the markets I track: stocks, crypto, FX, and commodities, so it works for any type of investor. And it supports 20 languages. Sign up for a free account through my link in the description. It supports the channel at no extra cost to you, and you'll get a $15 reward if you decide to buy a subscription via our referral link. Look first, then leap.
The euro isn't run by one bank in a vacuum. It's the euro system, the ECB at the centre, plus national central banks, NCBs, of countries that use the euro. They share one mandate: price stability. The ECB's owners are the EU's national central banks. Each subscribes capital by a capital key, GDP plus population. Euro area NCBs pay in fully and receive profit distributions. Non-euro NCBs subscribe but only pay a small share for costs, 3.75% of subscribed share value. The ECB sets the stance. NCBs implement it. One rule book, many hands. What the ECB actually does: it sets policy rates, the key interest rates, supplies or drains liquidity, and steers expectations so inflation returns to target over the medium term. ECB activities also include refi operations, weekly and longer-term loans to banks against collateral. Asset portfolios built during crises, bought, now largely rolling off. Backstops to stop market panic if needed. The transmission chain, ECB, moves rates. Banks change what they charge and pay. Credit and demand adjust. Inflation cools or warms. Supervision is not equal resolution. The ECB, via the Single Supervisory Mechanism SSM. SSM supervises big banks. If a bank fails, resolution is handled by the Single Resolution Board, SRB, with national teams. Deposits are protected by national deposit guarantee schemes. Law matters. The treaties ban monetary financing. The ECB can start quantitative easing and buy bonds only on secondary markets for monetary policy, never directly from governments. Past QE programs are Asset Purchase Programme, APP, 2015 to 2022, and Pandemic Emergency Purchase Programme, PAPP, launched 2020. These programs bought bonds on markets. In 2025, portfolios are running off the balance sheet, no reinvestment. If markets fragment, the ECB can still act with Transmission Protection Instrument TPI, announced 2022, and Outright Monetary Transactions OMT 2012, targeted, conditional, and strictly within mandate. Who decides? The Governing Council, 6 executive board members plus Euro area governors. One person, one vote, with rotation for the largest NCBs. NCBs still matter, Spain as example. Eurosystem roles for Banco de España. Implement ECB policy. Conduct FX operations under EU rules. Run, oversee payments, issue banknotes, assist ECB statistics. Spain's national roles: manage national reserves, circulate coins for the state, supervise smaller entities under its remit, support financial system stability, act as treasury agent for government debt, advise government, publish data research. Euro NCBs implement ECB rates. Non-Euro NCBs run their own monetary policy. Most target inflation, like Poland, Czechia, Sweden. The ECB authorises Euro banknotes and NCBs issue and circulate them. Coins are a state responsibility. NCBs handle circulation on the state's behalf. Bottom line, the ECB is the monetary engine. Rates, liquidity, rules. Growth, fiscal policy, reforms, investment lives with governments. Know the split and you'll know who to watch when prices move. First principle, NATO is Europe's primary collective defence backbone. The EU does not have a federal army. Defence stays national. The EU's role is to complement that through CSDP, coordinate, fund and act together where it adds value, missions, training, borders and big defence projects. What is CSDP? The Common Security and Defence Policy. The EU's CSDP is how Europe acts together abroad. Missions, civilian and military, capability development, and civil military tools that help partners stabilise and reform. Decision chain. Council approves a mission. A civilian or military operation commander is appointed. Member states provide forces and kit. Council controls the mandate. Nations keep command over their forces day to day. CSDP is EU quick reaction ambition. A rapid deployment capacity, with around 5,000 troops, to move for short, non-Article 5 crises, evacuations, first-in stabilisation, when Europeans choose to act together. EU countries co-develop CSDP kit through PESCO, coordinate via European Defence Agency EDA, and get EU R&D funding via the European Defence Fund EDF so industry can scale. The European Peace Facility EPF helps reimburse and finance equipment for partners and supports operations, Europe's wallet for hard security support. Borders and internal security links are Frontex, external border agency, supports member states with guards and surveillance. Europol connects police info, Eurojust links prosecutors. These are supporting, not replacing, national powers. Reality check. NATO is Europe's primary collective defence backbone. The EU complements it, missions, capabilities, sanctions and money tools, never replaces it. Legal safety nets inside the EU. Article 42.7 TEU, mutual assistance if a member state is attacked, and Article 222 TFEU, solidarity clause for terrorism and disasters. These are political obligations, not a standing EU army. During migration and nature crises, the EU can mobilise civil protection mechanism, humanitarian aid and border support, while member states decide on asylum and returns under EU law. One line to remember, NATO protects the territory, CSDP projects stability. Next up, we'll go inside the EEAS, the EU's diplomatic service that steers sanctions and runs the global network of EU delegations. First, the cast. The European Council sets the big strategic lines. The Foreign Affairs Council, foreign ministers, takes these decisions. The High Representative and Vice President of the Commission chairs and leads foreign ministers. The European External Action Service, EEAS, is the diplomatic service that prepares, coordinates and runs EU delegations worldwide. Why one state can block decisions? Because in CFSP and CSDP, the default rule is unanimity. Every capital must agree. One no stops the file. Common Foreign and Security Policy, CFSP, the EU's foreign policy umbrella, positions, sanctions, crisis lines, decided mostly by unanimity. Common Security and Defence Policy, CSDP, the EU's Mission Toolbox, civilian military operations and capability projects run under CFSP with forces from member states. There are pressure valves in these decisions. Constructive abstention. A country abstains without killing the decision. It won't have to apply it, but accepts that the EU moves on. Passerelles Limited can shift some CFSP decisions to qualified majority voting, QMV, not those with military defence implications. Sanctions and foreign policy workflow goes as follows. Step 1, start with unanimity on the political line, CFSP decision. Step 2, to make measures legally binding on companies and banks, adopt a council regulation by qualified majority voting. What the EEAS actually does here, drafts options with the Commission, coordinates positions, maintains sanctions lists, briefs ministers, and runs EU delegations, the eyes and ears of EU foreign policy, where the EU speaks with one voice and no single state veto. Trade policy. The EU is a customs union with one external tariff. The Commission negotiates trade deals, Council and Parliament approve. Some broad, mixed agreements can need national ratifications, but the core common commercial policy runs at EU level. Concrete example of mixed deal, CETA with Canada. Because it covered investment protection, it required every member state's ratification. Belgium's Walloon Parliament briefly blocked Belgium's signature in 2016, illustrating how national or regional approvals can delay a mixed agreement. Members keep their national foreign ministries. The goal is coherence. Align national actions with the EU line, so Europe speaks once, not 27 times. Takeaway, united, the EU is powerful, but unanimity makes CFSP fragile. Sanctions and CSDP need stitching. Trade is the clean one-voice lane unless the deal is mixed. EU enlargement is a rule-based marathon. Countries apply to join. EU checks values and capacity before opening the door. The bar to clear is the Copenhagen criteria: democracy and rule of law, human rights and minorities, a functioning market economy, and the capacity to adopt the EU acquis, the whole rule book. Think of enlargement like a 4-stop train. Stop 1. Application. A country raises its hand. Brussels, the Commission, gives an opinion, ministers agree unanimously, leaders endorse. That gets you on the board, like Bosnia and Herzegovina in the graphic. Stop 2. Candidate status, same 3 gates again, but now you're officially in the waiting room. Think Albania and North Macedonia here. Next, stop 3, negotiations. EU screens your laws, then you open approximately 35 chapters. Each chapter only closes when you hit the benchmarks, like Turkey, Montenegro, Serbia in the image. Stop 4, accession. Once all chapters close, you sign an accession treaty. The European Parliament consents, and every member state ratifies. Only then do the doors open and you're in the Union. Adopting the euro. No pick and choose once you're in the EU, except formal opt-outs. Country needs to adopt euro. You join when you meet the Maastricht criteria and spend time in ERM2. Countries join Schengen after separate evaluations, borders, data, police cooperation. It's about readiness, not just politics. The EU wants a bigger, stable neighbourhood, but insists on benchmarks first, money tied to reforms, and reversibility if backsliding returns. So what are the challenges that EU faces in the next decade? Picture the EU as a bridge in a storm. The cables are strong, but the wind is changing: security, energy, money, borders, tech, and possibly a larger union. The question isn't if it holds, it's how. First gust, defence. NATO is the safety net, but European industry still needs to deliver more, faster and together. The test for PESCO and the European Defence Fund is turning ideas into steel and silicon. Energy prices skyrocketed in the EU after the year 2022. After the shocks, competitiveness hinges on power source that is cheap, clean and reliable. Where and how EU can get cheap energy? Is nuclear power plants is the answer. The bottlenecks? Permits, grids and market design. Climate versus competitiveness is a balancing act. With CBAM at the border, firms either decarbonise or pay. The open question, can jobs stay while emissions fall? Look at these charts. The EU is lagging in the industrial policy race. The US and China are writing big checks for the AI and humanoid robots' future. Europe must choose between one coordinated plan or 27 small ones that collide. Fragmentation is the risk. Tech sovereignty isn't isolation. On chips, AI, cloud and cyber, the trick is choosing where to lead, where to partner, and how to regulate without smothering scale-ups. Banking union in the EU, unfinished. Supervision works, resolution exists, but European Common Deposit Insurance, EDIS, is the missing piece. Without it, stress can still jump borders. Borders and migration question is huge in the EU. Pressure at the edges will continue. The practical test will be, can the EU implement the new framework to keep aliens outside, keep order at external borders, and keep Schengen open inside? The geopolitics question is enormous, as it puts pressure on the competitive advantage of Europe. If sanctions will remain, supply chains will keep shifting, and coalition power to adapt to new realities matters, especially when costs land at home. The next decade is about capacity to build energy, defense, new tech, to decide on what to focus and to finance. Execute that trio, and Europe writes rules. Miss it, and Europe takes prices set elsewhere. That was a dense ride, but the wiring's clear now. Who decides, who pays, and how the money moves. Headlines should feel less noisy, more navigable. For viewers in the EU, or watching from outside, this toolkit shows how decisions touch daily life. Retail investors, founders, executives, you've got a compass to spot capital shifts and policy tailwinds, as you don't want to miss these opportunities. If this helped, tap subscribe, like button and notifications bell so you catch the next chapter. Drop a comment with the topic you want decoded next, and share this with a friend who follows markets or policy. And visit nextorder.enquirie to subscribe to our free newsletter. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.